Welcome, everyone. We're here because of a simple revolutionary truth. For our large, hidden patient community, hope is all about halting genetic kidney disease. For generations, this disease was a ghost. Today, a simple genetic test unlocks a diagnosis and, for the first time, a path to a promising treatment. But here's the challenge. There are 10,000 clinical nephrologists in the United States and nearly 100,000 worldwide. Yet very few recommend genetic testing. What's the barrier? Is it cost or lack of awareness? Whatever the reason, the result is the same. Our hundreds of thousands of patients, families, and children remain invisible. We are here to change that. This mission is personal. 35 years ago, I received a life-saving transplant from a 17-year-old donor who had a brain aneurysm. That gift defined my life's work as an advocate. My family has fought this genetic predator for 6 generations, dating back to 1849 with my great-grandfather, Rasmus Nielsen. I watched my father, a young surgeon, die at 43. I watched my sister endure dialysis for 20 years. My younger brother is gone too. Today, my siblings' children, including one of my own 5, face the 50% chance of inheriting this disease. This isn't a rare kidney disease for us. This is a children's disease. The near-term clinical trials we discussed yesterday are the bridge to their ADTKD patient survival. 10 years ago, the Nelsons only knew of 600 MUC1 patients. Today, estimates suggest that there are 2 million people globally with MUC1 and UMOD variants. Many of them are children. ADTKD is an insidious problem. It moves quietly through families for decades, only surfacing when it's too late. For 23 years, my family sought answers at the Mayo Clinic with doctors Peter Harris and Vicente Torres. It wasn't until we reached the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard and Wake Forest Medical School that the specific MUC1 variant was identified. In 2017, Anna Greca issued a challenge to 3 in my family. Find the patients and we will find the treatment. End quote. We founded the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation, RKDF, to do exactly that. The Rare Kidney Disease Foundation has a lean, all-volunteer leadership team. Families living with MUC1 and UMOD. It's a mighty team. We're working alongside titans from the Broad and Mayo and Wake Forest and Natera and AAKP. Our Patient Advocacy Foundation is a catalyst to halt the generational cycle. With Dr. Anna Greca's TED Talk 2.0 vision given yesterday and a phase 1 application with the FDA on the horizon, we aren't just dreaming of a cure, we're building the infrastructure for it. Continuing, it was very exciting to hear Anna foresee a 3 to 5 year timeline for 1 to 2 clinical trials for a successful treatment to halt ADTKD kidney disease yesterday. To the FDA officials and physicians, scientists participating in this summit, you are the bridge. To the panelists and patients, you are no longer invisible. I'd like to now turn the time over to our stellar executive director, Sharon McGroder, who will facilitate this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Everyone, that was Richard Nelson, co-founder, as he mentioned, and president of the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation. My name is Sharon McGroder, and I am the executive director, and I'm very happy to see you here today. I just want to thank, as Rich mentioned, our very lean but dedicated team of leaders without whose help this summit would not have existed. So I'd like to recognize the hard work of Sue Rial, Suzanne Kelly, Lisa Stankus, Lisa Parcell, Kathy Stankus, Rich Nelson, and then the social media and marketing expertise of Jess Leong, Christine Upton, and Joe Morden and Joe's fantastic team at the TMV group. I would like to go over a couple housekeeping items. First of all, attendees, your audio and video will be kept off the entire summit today, but we do want to hear from you. So after each session, there will be a 5 or 10-minute Q&A, and at that point, you can ask questions, or at any point actually, you can ask questions through the Q&A function of Zoom at the bottom of your screen. If you roll over with your mouse, you'll see the Q&A. Please don't post questions in chat. In fact, I'm not sure you're able to. So just go right to the Q&A and let us know what your questions are. And if they're aimed at a particular panelist, let us know that as well. You can also choose to ask a question anonymously. So there's a box that says, send anonymously. Check that before you send your question. Now, if we don't get to your question during the summit, we do plan on answering all questions in writing after the summit and post it on our website. So know that we do hear you. We will answer you, if not live, then eventually in writing. Now, if you're having technical difficulties during the summit, please email info@rarekidney.org. And this event is being recorded, and all of the sessions today will be posted on our RKDF's YouTube channel, on our ViewMedi channel, that's VUMEDI, which is where a lot of nephrologists and medical professionals go for quick information on important topics. And so we have a channel there to share information, and will be used in our social media posts. Okay, on to today's session. During today's patient program, you'll learn about what it takes to bring a promising treatment to market, which is just very exciting that we're even talking at this point about that part of the process. As Rich said, it's coming. It's coming very soon. Second, why patient registries are critical for advancing research and for helping to bring a treatment to market. We'll learn about how to talk with your nephrologist about genetic testing, given that genetic testing is the most definitive and, not to mention, the least invasive way to diagnose ADTKD. And in the end, scientists can't learn about ADTKD, and scientists can't find a treatment or a cure if they can't find ADTKD patients. So again, as Rich mentioned, that's what we're all about at the foundation, supporting patients, finding patients, and helping to pave the way for a clinical trial on the horizon. And then in our final session, you will meet 3 RKDF volunteers who will share what they do and why they chose to volunteer for RKDF. And very shamelessly, we're hoping that will inspire many of you to contact us to find a way to volunteer. We're always looking for help. We always need expertise and dedication, and there's so much more we could do if we had more bodies to do it. So that should be an exciting session as well. But like yesterday, we're going to begin today's session with the voice of ADTKD patients and a non-ADTKD family member, because as a patient advocacy organization, we believe it's critical to center the patient voice in everything we do. So let me start by introducing you to Christine, her sister Sherry, and Sherry's husband, David. Now, all 3 are fantastic ambassadors for RKDF, spreading the word about the foundation, about the disease, about what nephrologists need to know to better serve and improve care for patients. And we are just so grateful for their hard work, and we're really happy that they're here today. So, hi, everyone. Thank you. I do want to mention too that David's company, the Vistra Corporation, donated $3,000 last year toward this goal. So we're very grateful also for their support. All right, why don't I then kick it off with Christine and Sherry, and I guess Christine, you'll go first, share some family history and talk about what it's like living with ADTKD.
Sure. Good morning, Sharon and everybody. I just want to thank you for inviting me, my sister, and my brother-in-law to speak today. The sessions yesterday were incredible, very inspiring, and I'm grateful for the tireless work that everybody's doing to push us towards a cure for my family and many other families with CKD. So my story is shortly after I got married in 1989, I was in for a routine physical and found out that my blood pressure was pretty high, and did some blood work, found out that my creatinine was 2.0, and immediately warning bells went off because my dad had also had a kidney transplant 4 years before that. So I quickly was referred to a nephrologist and went down the road pretty quickly. Within 2 years, I was on peritoneal dialysis and received a transplant in 1994. So this year marks 32 years out from my transplant, which I am deeply grateful for. It was from the National Donor List. And it came 6 months after I started dialysis, which is pretty rare to be on the national list. So I was super grateful. So like I said, my dad had also had kidney failure. So kind of warning bells were going off, like, could this be genetic for our family? And so our family's pretty passionate about genealogy. So we had a lot of records to kind of go back and see if there was any rhyme or reason to why we were all getting kidney failure. And so I'm going to share my screen now, a little bit about that kind of shows our family tree. If you can see it. Can you see it? I just want to see if everybody can see it yet.
Oh, it's loading now.
There we go. So we've traced it back to my Irish great-grandfather, who died in 1902 at 67 years old. And back then they called it Bright's disease, which must be like an early sort of name for kidney failure that we don't really know, but that's what was listed on his death certificate. And then he passed it down to my great-grandmother, who died in 1940 at 69 years old. And also there were markers that she had some sort of renal dysfunction, and who passed it then to my grandfather, who died at 1953 at 46 with uremia. And then he had two children, my dad and my aunt, and both of them ended up in renal failure. And my dad was 58 years old when he died. He was diagnosed in 83. He started hemodialysis for several years and ended up with a transplant and was doing great. And then he unfortunately passed away in 94, not from his kidney transplant. And his only sister, like I said, she also was, she decided to do peritoneal dialysis and did that for a little while and ended up with a transplant. And so we've really just now kind of, we're down to like my generation and now my children. And so it's passed to Sherry and I, and two of our other siblings do not have the gene. We've all been tested now. And the same on my aunt's side with her children. They were tested. Two of them have had transplants, and one of her grandchildren had a transplant. So we are very passionate about finding a cure for this, and so appreciate Anna. I've been to the Broad and met Anna and Jillian and all their lab of young people that are working tirelessly, and just so encouraged by what they've done. And I just am so thankful that we're close to hopefully having a cure for this. And it certainly would affect our family. And we would be extremely grateful. So I'm going to pass it now to my sister, who's going to more talk about how we got connected with Dr. Blyer.
Yes, so good morning. As Chris said, as a result of our family history, we decided to start being checked for high blood pressure and checking our creatinine. When I was in college, we would get it checked yearly, even though they told us that it was not hereditary at that point. But, you know, you get that feeling inside of you that something just isn't quite right about that statement. And so that propelled us to be a little bit more proactive and be self-advocates and try to find answers for ourselves. And so it wasn't until I was 28, I believe, that I started looking at newspaper articles and found a newspaper article about a researcher from Syracuse University that had done a familial study on a family about an hour away from us that had a genetic kidney disease. And of course, that piqued my interest. And I was very curious if this researcher would then be interested in taking a look at our family. So I contacted his office at Syracuse University, and he said, sure, send me your family tree. And so we did, and we put the markers on there for who had transplants, who had kidney failure. And he was very curious and very interested. And it wasn't shortly after that that I ended up in the emergency room with very high blood pressure and also an elevated creatinine level. And I contacted him and said, would you take me on as your patient? And of course, he obliged. And that started the ball rolling with our family of being in the limelight of researchers and physicians. And as a result of that, he had a understudy that was willing to come to my grandmother's calling hours and do DNA testing on any family member that was interested in being just tested at that point for their research, not for us to find out necessarily if we had a genetic condition, because at that point, there wasn't anything known. This was 2002, I believe. And so we had our DNA tested with just a cheek swab and some blood work, and then became connected with Dr. Blyer and followed Dr. Blyer's information. He contacted us regularly, and we met with him in Syracuse when he did a group speaking engagement to anyone with MUC1 or UMOD at that point. And from there, we just kept following online, and I came across Mr. Nelson's social media post and contacted him and said I was interested in learning more about the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation, and had a wonderful phone call with him and talked about what I could do to be supportive to the foundation, and became an ambassador at that point and have been working hard to spread the word about the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation and the work that we've been trying to accomplish through that. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that later too. But I'm going to pass it on to my husband and let him share a little bit with you about what it's like to be a part of this family with many members with rare kidney disease.
Good morning. You mute your mic. Okay. So that should hopefully work out. No, your volume, I guess. So unfortunately, we are in the same house, husband and wife, so that sometimes works in our favor, but not when we're doing conferencing on two different laptops. So my name is Dave, married to Sherry since 1988. Met her and her family as her dad was in transplant mode and got the transplant, just received the transplant, I believe, when I met her. Um, so I've seen a little bit on the family side and not understanding the disease or not understanding exactly what was going to happen or that it was even going to affect anybody else in the family. From a family member, an outsider, or sometimes my wife would say, "Hey, you're going to give the outlaw perspective." Um, it is one of uncertainty because you're not sure what's going on. And I think that that's important to understand that that's an okay feeling. But then when you get into the role of being a supportive husband to my wife and brother-in-law to Christine, you realize there's important factors that go along with this. The one is self-advocacy, especially in the earlier days when it wasn't considered a hereditary disease, and when doctors were trying to finding out information was kind of difficult because the doctors themselves didn't have the information. So you had to be a self-advocate of getting tested or taking a look at different labs to find out what was going on, and then talking amongst ourselves about well, what do we see? What do we think's happening? Um, Another big one is support. As a family member, and although not having the disease myself, we're the support chain. We are sometimes emotional support, sometimes we're physical support, especially when the patients are maybe struggling. In this case, my wife. Um, it was difficult, but at that point, you start drawing on your personal expertise and training. My background is a little bit of military, but it's also in the engineering field. And so there were parts of the dialysis where the system is overwhelmed. And I think when we started dialysis, there were thousands of patients getting dialysis. And so they set you up with a routine to get your, in this case, it was peritoneal for my wife, to get your percentage bags correct for the peritoneal dialysis. And they can get you on target. But really, my wife's background in teaching and my background in engineering and some chemistry, we were able to better regulate her peritoneal dialysis by putting the correct percentage bags on. But it takes involvement. It takes using what we have personal expertise on. Some people's backgrounds are different, and when they can pull on that expertise to help their loved ones, then they're better part of that support. I think learning expertise in other fields, being open to research, the ATDKD when it was named was a big deal for us when we found out that it had a name. It was a potential a huge breakthrough for us because you could actually go, okay, we have this in our family, and now what? And I think through that and through Dr. Blair and now Richard Nelson having the RKDF, it gives us more of a focus. So when you get to that point and you realize that part of the problem is information dispersion, then you become active. If you are passionate about helping your loved ones, your family, and others that may be in this situation, then you start asking, well, what can I do? The researchers are doing their deal. That is not in my wheelhouse. I respect what they do, the hours they put in, but what can I do to help? Part of that is fundraising. I mean, I became a volunteer so I could help with fundraising. I also became a volunteer so I could go to a nephrologist's office or mail packets out. And I think part of what she mentioned at the beginning, was the that my company got involved. Well, that's because my company is it's big. It's based out of Dallas, but we're more like a family. And so when something is affecting somebody in our company, our team members rally. So when they heard that not only was this disease named, but that we were volunteering for it, they wanted to be a part. So I talked with our community contributions and committee down in Dallas. I got them on board as long as some questions were answered. I worked back and forth with RKDF about answering what they had for questions about this uh, relatively new um, uh, organization. And then my teams and my other manager teams at work put together a day for when we got together, and we did 500 not emailing, mailing sessions. We got together to do 500 packets. So we did the envelopes and the what we call testimony letters, one introducing them to the RKDF, one introducing them to a patient, which was my wife, and introducing them to what it was about and that we were seeking a treatment and how we were seeking the treatment. And those packets went out to different dialysis clinics, different nephrologists, different doctors groups, not only in the United States, but a few actually went international. So when you get to the point where it's involvement, then you realize that it's a passion. And when you see things like this happening today, I'm going to end with this, that you end up at the point of gratefulness, which is where I am. This affects our kids, little emotion. This affects grandkids. If by our passion, we can help their lives to be better lives with with a possibility of a treatment, then it's worth working for. Thank you for your time. I do appreciate all the members. I appreciate being able to speak, and I really love what you are all are doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave and Sherry and Chris, for helping us understand your journey going on over 25 years, just your own, let alone what you went through with your father and your aunt. So thank you for sharing that today. Um, I'd like to see if we have any questions from our audience. And maybe Dave and Chris, you can come back on.
Hi, Sharon. We have no questions for the audience at this time.
Okay. Um, is there anything else, any other closing remarks you all would like to make?
I will
You're
just
you're on mute, Christine.
Oh, there we go. No, I'm good. I'm just thankful for all of you.
Well, and we're thankful for you for all that you do. So thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll move on to our next session. Okay. All right. Our next session will be moderated by Soren Fidelis. Now, Dr. Fidelis is the executive director of the Polycystic Kidney Disease Outcomes Consortium at the Critical Path Institute. The Critical Path Institute is a nonprofit organization that collaborates with scientists, regulatory agencies, biopharmaceutical firms, and patient groups to accelerate the development of therapies for people with unmet medical needs. So let me turn it over to Soren, who will introduce panelists Dr. Eliza Thompson and Dr. Michelle Campbell. Welcome, Soren.
Thanks so much, Sharon. Thanks for the invitation to be here today. And yeah, I just want to say how inspiring hearing all the stories has been. And you know, I think the field is really coming to an inflection point, right? Where you got the scientific translational efforts, you've got the patient community that is so involved, and then you have increasing industry interest and regulatory engagement, right? And that is what moves the needle when it comes to developing drugs for devastating diseases like ADTKD. So again, very happy to be here. And I'm honored to introduce the two panelists, Lisa Thompson and Michelle Campbell. Sharon, do you want me to introduce both Lisa and Michelle or sequentially?
Whatever you like.
Um, okay, I'll do it for both Lisa and Michelle, and then I'll turn it over to Lisa. So Lisa Thompson is the director of the Division of Cardiology and Nephrology, Center for Drug Evaluation and Research at FDA. And her division, the cardiology and nephrology, reviews investigational new drug applications and marketing applications for drug and biologic products for the treatment of cardiovascular and kidney diseases. Dr. Thompson joined the FDA in 2007, and prior to that, she was deputy director of the division. Prior to that, obviously, she received her medical degree from Johns Hopkins Medical School and completed her internal medicine and nephrology training at Columbia and NYU. And she also holds a Master of Science in Biostatistics from Columbia. Dr. Michelle Campbell is the Associate Director for Stakeholder Engagement and Clinical Outcomes in the Office of Neuroscience, Office of New Drugs in FDA's CDER, Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. Dr. Campbell has been at FDA since 2014, and she was previously a reviewer in the clinical outcome assessments staff and scientific coordinator of the clinical outcome assessment qualification program. Dr. Campbell's focus is in the area of patient-focused drug development and the use of patient experience data in the context of regulatory drug applications. So in her role, she engages in discussions and reviews in terms of novel endpoints, including digital health technology to support regulatory decision making. Very honored to turn this over to Elisa for her presentation. Elisa?
Thank you. And I think the first step is just to make sure I put my slides up and everyone can see them. So let's start. And I just want to make sure, Soren, you'll tell me as well if I'm in the right display mode in terms of what you're seeing, or do I need to swap? You see my note, or do you see just one slide or other?
Just one slide, so you can make it screen mode. We're good.
So switch it, or the display is good.
Put it in your right now you're in speaker view mode.
Yeah.
All right. What about now?
There you go.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for inviting me to attend and to listen. I really learned a lot. I was able to call into some of the meeting yesterday, and fortunately was also able to hear some of the stories this morning in terms of how the disease has affected both you all, the patients, as well as your families. So again, just want to thank you so much for including me. Over the next 10 minutes or so, I think I was tasked with talking a little bit about FDA's role in drug development and also specifically focusing on drug development for rare diseases such as ADTKD. And, I think what you heard from the beginning of this and throughout the last 2 days and more, you're going to hear this from Michelle, is that your voice in this process, your role in this is critical. You are going to drive this and have been really excited to hear already how much you all have done and how much RDKF has done to really advance innovation in this space. And again, Michelle will really focus on what you can do as well from a drug development standpoint. So just at a high level, a quick reminder. So FDA is responsible for ensuring the safety, efficacy, and security of human and veterinary drugs, biologic products, medical devices, the safety of food supply and cosmetics and products that emit radiation. So it has a whole lot of responsibilities. And there are a number of different centers within FDA. The center where Michelle and I work is referred to as the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. And what our center really focuses on is making sure that safe and effective drugs are available to improve the health of the people in the United States. Um, within the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research is an office, and that office is called the Office of New Drugs. And this office regulates the development and approval of new drugs and new uses of already approved drugs and monitors their safety. And I'll tell you a little bit more about how we do that. And then, as Soren noted, where I sit is in the Division of Cardiology and Nephrology, which reviews a lot of the products being developed to treat cardiac and kidney diseases. All right, so in this slide, you see a really high level overview of the drug development process. And though it shows the drug development process as being very sort of serial and set in nature, sometimes these phases can be a bit blurred. But really, the first phase is really discovery and sort of preclinical work. And I think Anna Greca and perhaps others yesterday did a wonderful job of telling you about some of the really important work that her lab and her team are doing to advance therapeutic innovation, to find compounds that may be effective in treating ADTKD. And I liked how when Anna spoke about her work, she focused not just on trying to identify compounds that are effective, but also commented on the other thing they're paying attention to is safe, right? Because we want these compounds not only to be effective, but safe. In essence, once the preclinical work is done and someone's, identified an appropriate compound, FDA gets involved. And how sort of drug development proceeds is generally from what we refer to as phase 1 studies, which are really focused on better understanding safety and some what we call clinical pharmacology characteristics. They're studies that are often done actually in healthy people in highly monitored settings. We're giving them just a single dose of the drug and watching them closely. And then from there, development proceeds to what we refer to as phase 2 and phase 3 studies. So in the phase 2 studies, they're often done in the patient population. The phase 2 studies begin to, obtain some data to support proof of concept, better understand the doses we should be evaluating. And then finally, the phase 3 studies are the ones that are supposed to provide really the definitive data on effectiveness. And then once sponsors are done with that, they come in and request approval. If you're in the US, they request approval, or if they're trying to market a product in the US, they request approval from us. If I know this is an international group, and so other countries have their own regulatory bodies. And then once a product is approved, there's a post-marketing phase where we continue to learn a lot about the drug, often as more and more people are exposed to it. So what is FDA's role in all of this? Well, throughout these clinical phases of development, our role is to ensure, and this is a very important job, that the people who participate in trials, we need to ensure their safety. So that's one really critical thing that we spend a lot of time focusing on, is making sure people are safe when they participate in trials. And the other critical task we have is that we work with industry, with sponsors, to ensure really that the product development is efficient, and as well as that it really, the programs develop the robust evidence needed to assess safety and efficacy. And again, Michelle in the next talk will speak more to your role in this process. All right, so I think as you heard from Anna and have others maybe have noted as well, there are challenges in terms of developing drugs for rare diseases. Often, again, the diseases affect very small populations. There are other challenges. Patients don't even know they have the disease. It's also true that we often have less information on the course of disease or who's at high risk of actually progressing to really bad outcomes. But the reason I like to show this slide is that despite all these challenges, we have been incredibly successful in developing therapies for rare diseases. So this shows you the new drug approvals in 2025. And as you can see, about 50% of the products of novel drug approvals were actually in the rare disease space. And this year, 2025, was not a year that was any different from any other year. I mean, we see very high levels of approvals. So why is that? Well, I think one of the important reasons we're seeing so much innovation in rare diseases is because there's actually financial incentives that have been put in place to really ensure that we develop therapies for rare diseases as well as our common ones. And so just want to highlight this law from 1983, which put in place a lot of these financial incentives that really intended to make sure that drug development for rare diseases was viable and attractive to industry. But what I do want to emphasize is that though this act provides incentives, again, financial incentives, it does not change, what we ultimately want these development programs to show or what's needed to support approval. Because at the end of the day, just like we need safe and effective therapies for our common diseases, we also need safe and effective therapies for our rare diseases. So again, the idea is not to lower the bar or to sort of say anything goes in terms of getting a product on the market for a rare disease. Rather, really, the idea here is to provide financial incentives. And I do want to acknowledge, however, that we understand that how you design a drug development program to sort approval for a common disease is going to be very different from how we do it for rare diseases. And I think it just emphasizes that, when we design development programs for rare diseases, we just need to be smarter about how we design these programs. I think another reason why, we see so much innovation in the rare disease space and why we've had so much success is related to some of the programs that we also have at the FDA. And I think if you look at other regulatory bodies, they also have programs, they call them something else, that are also were created really to facilitate and expedite drug development and review for the development of therapies intended to address serious and life-threatening diseases with unmet medical need. And really what these approaches allow us or can allow is really more interactions between industry and FDA. There's providing some greater flexibility as well about the program designs and sort of at what stage you get approved, and also shortened timelines for review. And again, because so many of our rare diseases are often very serious diseases, life-threatening, and again, have so much unmet need, often these diseases are eligible for these various programs that are meant to support drug development. I also want to highlight that we have other initiatives. Again, at that opening slide or one of the early ones, I showed you, this large organization, FDA, and even within FDA, we are trying to work across centers to really support collaboration and connections with the goal of improving outcomes for rare diseases and really to share knowledge, identify sort of scientific and policy issues that could really sort of, if we have these discussions, really support greater innovation in the space. In addition, remember I showed you the center where Michelle and I work is, one of the centers within the agency. Our center also has a lot of initiatives in place to really accelerate drug development for rare disease. And want to highlight that the center is also, at least to date, funded, two projects, very important projects, to develop tools to be used in rare disease drug development. And by tools, I mean, potentially better understanding of the natural history as well as sort of things we can measure in the blood or urine or on imaging that, can help us identify the patients who are likely to advance with the disease, as well as to understand sort of maybe what endpoints we could use. And the reason why I wanted to especially focus on this activity of this program is because I am tremendously excited about this program that we awarded. It's to Soren's group as well as to this group from Wake Forest, and you're going to hear more about some of the work. I hope you're going to hear more about this in the next talk. But really, just amazing work that's being done to really advance the toolkit and develop the toolkit we need to really advance innovation in this space, to really give industry what they need so that they can bring their compounds and quickly get those compounds through the drug development process. And so, with that, I'm going to stop and really hand it over to Michelle. I just want to, emphasize that really successful drug development takes a village. And I think it's just amazing to see, clearly seen over the last 2 days that you guys have already assembled that village, and that's, really important. And again, just want to emphasize, and Michelle will speak more to this, that you all have to drive this. You all are the experts in this disease. You will be using the therapies when they're approved. You will also be the ones participating in the clinical trial. So you really, really do need to be involved. So with that, I'm going to see if I can stop sharing and put myself on mute.
Thanks so much, Elisa. Wonderful presentation. And we'll have questions after Michelle's talk, so we can pass this over to Michelle to share her slides.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. And I apologize if you now hear some background noise. I am house sitting at my parents', and my dad's fire monitor pager just went off, which means there's something in the local town. I apologize. But I'm going to start trying to share my screen for you guys and get started. And I just want to thank Lisa. She set me up way too well. I honestly think you're going to hear, which we want you to make sure you hear, a lot of the same supportive messages of what really we are passionate about at the FDA and at the agency, and what we're really supporting, and how do patients and patient-focused drug development really come into play. So, okay, you guys should be able to see my full screen now. So, good morning, everyone. Happy Saturday. I also want to thank Christine and Sherry and Dave and Rich for opening remarks and sharing your lived experience. And really, I think that is the fundamental crux of patient-focused drug development, is learning from these lived experience, as you are the experts of your conditions, and we need to learn directly from you. So I am from the Office of Neuroscience, which is a little odd. However, I spend most of my days in rare disease landscape. And our mission across the agency with patient-focused drug development is similar. And I do work closely with Elisa and actually her team, and some of the challenges that they face in their rare diseases, where us in the Office of Neuroscience, which is where the neurology divisions and psychiatry divisions sit, are battling every day. I think it's important to note that every therapeutic review division in the Office of New Drugs has a rare disease. So we are familiar with rare diseases, and we are up for these challenges into drug development. So what is patient-focused drug development? So we have actually defined it, that it's the systematic approach to ensure that we're capturing the patient's experience and perspectives, and that they're making sure they are being incorporated into drug development, as well as the evaluation of that drug, that treatment that we're wanting to study. For the FDA, some of these efforts that we've undertaken first started in 2012 through our led what we called patient-focused drug development meetings. And I'm going to show you a timeline in a little bit that will explain the evolution of patient-focused drug development. But we were mandated in something called PDUFA 5, and PDUFA is what is known as our user fees, and this is negotiated every 5 years between us at FDA and industry on commitments that both sides make to help look at innovation and research and novel ideas, as well as help with timelines and what are some priorities for the evolution of drug development. And in PDUFA 5, and we're in PDUFA 7 now, just to give you a spectrum of the time that's happened, there was this mandate for us to have these meetings and to learn from patients directly on their lived experience. And we were mandated to have 20 meetings at that time, and we ended up having close to 25 before the end of that 5-year period. And we learned a lot in those meetings. The number one thing is that patients are the experts, and so we have to talk to patients. We also learned that oftentimes what is the most important things in a patient's lives may not actually be captured in our clinical trials and in those drug development programs. And I will highlight how we need to balance that in a little bit between what is very important to patients in their everyday life, as well as understanding what we think the treatment is going to impact. So from there, we began, even though we're no longer mandated to have these meetings, we do still have these meetings periodically if there's in disease areas that we think is critically important. However, what has really sprung from these meetings is our externally led patient-focused drug development meeting series. And these meetings actually are directly from you. Patient groups will submit a letter of intent to have these meetings. and run by them. And respective review divisions across all 3 medical product centers are invited to listen directly from you about your lived experience. We also have put forward a methodological guidance series, which really helps us think about how do we capture what's important to patients and how do we translate that into ways to measure these concepts into a clinical trial to support our trial endpoints. We also fund it. Now, we are not a natural funding agency, but you're now hearing 2 examples, one from Lisa and now this one, of opportunities where we have actually funded efforts. And this one is looking at clinical outcome assessments. And these are the assessments that are used to support typically your primary endpoint in your clinical trials or the rest of your endpoint hierarchy. And so this effort was to work in areas of unmet need to develop clinical outcome assessments that could be used broadly in various diseases that were specific areas of unmet need. So it is really important, we take this to heart. And one of the things we always are looking for is, has patients been included into the drug development space, and has sponsors talked to patients about their lived experience? So in front of you is a slide of our benefit risk framework. And this is what Eliza and I and our teams, this is our everyday, right? This is what we're doing. And this is the mindset that, as Eliza said to you about what we're looking at for safety and for efficacy. Is something working and is it safe? We put this in every review document for our marketing application about what was our thinking. But why am I showing this to you? Because this can get really technical if you go read one of these in our approval package. Well, why it's important is we have to understand directly about the disease and the course of the disease, which comes from natural history. And that comes from you. That comes from the understanding of participating in registries or other natural history studies of what does the disease look like? What is the prognosis of the disease? Is this a progressive disease that is fatal? Is this an acute symptomatic disease? And we need to understand what that looks like. How serious is the indication? So all of these boxes that we are filling out, the patient experience is critical for us to be able to accurately reflect what we know about a disease or condition that we're reviewing in that marketing application. At the big end is making sure that we've identified a treatment benefit or a clinical benefit, as in we're seeing an improvement in how the individual person's field functions or survives. We have to balance that with risk and our safety aspects. And it is always important for us to understand what are the risks that our patient population are willing to take. We know in the rare disease community that many patients will tell us, we'll take any risk. We will take that risk if it will help us. But I do think it's an important conversation when we're looking at some of our more novel therapies that are being developed and some of these unknown risks that we have some uncertainty on, to have a more targeted conversation about really that balance of benefit and risk and what is really acceptable for patients and their families. So this complements Eliza's slide that she showed the different phases of drug development. Here, what I've done is added, where does the patient input matter and where can it happen and how early should that occur in drug development? So as we're in those preclinical phases, when people are starting to look at maybe the animal models and testing things like that, as a patient groups and a patient community, we should be thinking about identifying that lived experience and what are the concepts and burdensome features of the disease that matter most to patients, right? Qualitatively, how do we collect that information? This is important because we want to understand that for us when we're providing advice on the optimal ways to measure these concepts in our clinical trials. In the clinical trial phase, right, during that development of your phase 2 and 3 programs, making sure we work with patients can help us including designing better clinical studies. I remember as a young research coordinator being part of a rare disease clinical trial and getting a phone call from a parent saying, hey, school's about to start. I think we're going to end the study because, that dosing of that medication is in the middle of the school day for lunch. And that's when my child sits to go to lunch. And now they have to go to nurse and they already stand out because of their rare disease. I'd rather keep them included with their friends. Well, had the people who had developed a study protocol talked to families, that may have been able to be avoided, and we could have had less, of early termination visits from people if we had actually talked to families. And this is and this happened in the early 2000s, so before really the forefront of patient-focused drug development. But that experience very much resonates me when we're looking at our trial designs. Patients can help inform that. What makes sense for them? We know in rare disease communities, burdensomeness of going to the clinic for all these visits and the tests that have to be done is really hard, and we need to take that into account. Talking to families is important for that. Talking to communities is important in terms of recruitment. Having clinical trial readiness within your community and preparing them for what the trial could look like is really important, as well as retention in our trials. Our trials can be long, depending on what we think the impact of the treatment's going to do. It may be a longer trial. And so we need to make sure that we're able to retain and that families fully understand. And if you note, I say the word families, because I'm going to be very honest, as a former research coordinator, when I was recruiting, I wasn't recruiting the individual person, I was recruiting their entire family into this clinical trial. And so it's really important that we take into account this overall aspect of retention and recruitment, because it's really going to be the family's aspect, not just that individual person. When we're doing our review, we hope that what's included from a drug sponsor is our patient-centered outcomes. Information or patient experience data directly coming from patients is included for us to be able to review. This is often critical for us when we're reviewing the results to really see what the impact of this potential treatment was on the person. And so that really helps us, and it's extremely informative. And then in the post-market space, as Lisa mentioned, we're continuing to look at safety as well as continued efficacy in the broader disease population that now has this opportunity for new treatment. And so we need to make sure that we communicate that the side effects, the safety profiles, what we think the treatment should be doing based on those clinical trials in an effective way to help facilitate the decision-making that will happen between a clinician and their families if this is the appropriate treatment for them. So as you can see from that, patients are critically important. So this is a really great timeline of just like what's happened in the last decade at FDA. And so, like I said, in PDUFA 5 in 2012, we started with PDUFA 5 and those patient-focused drug development meetings. And really it was, how do we incorporate the patient into the labeling? I joined the agency in the infancy. Lisa's been there since the very beginning too. And we have seen the exponential growth of how to incorporate the patient experience and the lived experience into not just into the assessments that we're capturing, but actually into the full aspect of drug development and that entire, timeline of what that looks like. So we've had PFDD meetings. We went to these externally led. We implemented from 2016 under a law called 21st Century Cures, a patient experience data table. This is a required table that sponsors have to submit in their marketing applications that denote what patient experience data have they submitted for us to review. And so they put it in there. And then when we do our reviews, we have to mark off what we received. Did we receive that information, and where can we find it if it was used in our review? This has been a really great way to see how much stuff is actually coming in. And we do use this information. We worked and have published 3 of our 4 of our methodological guidance series as our final guidances and are critical to drug development space, our core grant program. And most recently, we published our first draft guidance, which is an ICH, which is International Card Harmonization, efforts on patient preference studies and how they can be used into drug development. And that has just recently happened within the last 4 weeks, was published as a draft guidance to FDA. So we are part of the forefront in this and how to be innovative, including the patient experience. So patient experience data, just what it says. What is your everyday life experience? It's a broad concept. It can be very inclusive of many things, but we really want to make sure we're capturing this throughout our drug development programs. This is really critical for us. And I will say in some examples, it's really important to us when we're thinking about that optimal patient group. What does that patient population in our trials look like? And what information do we have? So this data and this capturing this is so important. As I said, these are just some examples. We can get patient experience data from our patient listening sessions. The use of clinical outcome assessments. I always have to remind people that the endpoints are patient experience data. When most people ask us, what are we doing with patient experience data? We kind of forget that, but they want to think about some of the broader things. But picking optimal endpoints is critical. And as Elisa alluded to, we need to be smarter in our trial designs in our rare disease spaces, and optimal endpoint selection is part of that and is very critical, which is why good natural history is so important to us. So these are just some examples of patient experience data that can easily be captured. So how do we engage with the FDA? We have patient listening sessions. We have our patient-focused drug development program, and we have critical path innovation meetings. Each are for kind of a different targeted audience, where patient listening sessions and patient-focused drug development are more geared to patient groups and ways to come in, tell us about your lived experience. Critical path innovation meetings are usually for novel ideas, novel concepts. So we see a lot about this maybe in novel digital health technologies, COAs, or maybe a biomarker that wants to be explored outside of that drug development program. But Elisa and I would both encourage any sponsor to start talking to us early about anything novel in their programs as early as possible so we can give you the best advice of what is needed to support that evidence for those novel outcomes or biomarkers that you may want to consider using in your trial. So, as I mentioned, our PFTD meetings are probably one of our biggest successfuls. We get a voice of the patient report. We refer to that report all the time. And finally, we have this really overly, if you haven't some insomnia, methodological guidance series that I was a part of developing. Elisa was a critical reviewer and has been extremely supportive of this program. Here's what I just want to tell you about this. We have put together a cookbook on how to really capture the patient's lived experience in a rigorous way to help support regulatory decision making. The first two guidances were written for patient groups, how to qualitatively capture rigorous data and be informative. The last two guidances are written more for our industry colleagues because they're the ones who are going to have to put this all together. It is intense. Please know that there are people who know how to do this. But really it is, I think, a great example of us trying to truly be able to incorporate the full patient lived experience. So with that, I thank you and look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Michelle and Aliza. Wonderful presentations. So I have prepared a few questions for the panel, and then I'll check in to see. I see one question in the Q&A, but let me just ask couple of questions that to go along with the opportunities and challenges you guys described. So in terms of the work that RKDF is doing, and in terms of the work that CPATH and other consortia are doing in the context of rare genetic kidney disorders, in this case ADTKD, what role can those organizations play in helping de-risk rare kidney disease programs, in this case ADTKD? So how can they contribute to building that toolkit that Aliza mentioned when it comes to being able to enroll patients, run trials efficiently? And this question is for both Aliza and Michelle. As we think about the toolkit, how can these organizations contribute to that process?
Michelle, do you want to go first, or do you want me to start
Sure.
off?
I can start and I'll turn it over to you. So that's a really great question. I think what's important for patient groups is we know that to help advance science, efforts that happen outside of an individual drug development program are critical, right? We call it working in the pre-competitive space, where we leverage all of our key opinion leaders, so our academics, our industry, and our patient groups to work on key research questions that could help inform drug development. And I think the BAA that Aliza mentioned is a great example of that, right? So to help us outside of that program that will help the greater good is important. I think for patients, letting industry know about your disease, what is there, development of a natural history study or patient registry can be extremely informative and helpful for all players. We are just one player in drug development, and as Aliza mentioned, we are just one health authority as well. Rare disease is global, and a lot of our trials are global. But the information that you can collect will help all of us who are health authority groups that someone may engage with. So I really think it's important to continue doing what you're doing and advocating, but also thinking about how do you prepare your communities for trials and trial readiness, and what could that look like. But I think building and collecting that lived experience in a rigorous way and thinking about it early now and instead of as an afterthought will actually have the greater impact for the future for drug development.
Thanks, Michelle. Aliza?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't really have anything to add. I think Michelle hit on all the critical aspects.
Perfect. So in terms of ADTKD, right? It is very well defined genetically. MAC1, UMAD accounting for the vast majority of cases, but it is a very heterogeneous disease. So, from your perspective, what would be the biggest barriers preventing therapies from reaching patients today for ADTKD? And you've covered things that partly answer this question, but anything else you would like to add?
Maybe I'll start off on this one. And I think, again, as you noted in the question, and as we also heard from, some of the stories that were shared, the disease course can be heterogeneous, right? Some patients may progress rapidly, others may not. And this is not uncommon with a lot of the genetic diseases that we see. But I think it, again, highlights the need to really understand and develop, whether they're biomarkers, things we can measure in the blood or urine or an imaging that can tell us who is likely to progress. So I think that, again, it speaks to the important work that's being done by both your group at CPATH as well as, within Wake Forest. And again, you'll hear more about this registry and hopefully this initiative. But I think it speaks to the importance of that. That I think the other challenge often we see in rare disease spaces, and again, I think it was sort of eloquently pointed out in some of the discussions yesterday, as well as today, is often patients aren't actually who have the disease aren't diagnosed as having it, right? They're told it's due to something else. So I think that's the other challenge that needs to be overcome. And I think, everything that RKDF is doing is really important to sort of make sure to educate the community, get people tested so that they actually know that they have the disease. And that speaks to, again, the trial readiness, right? We can identify people who have the disease so that, they can then enter the trials. I think all this is important for drug development in this space.
Thank you, Lisa. Michelle, you want to add anything to that? Otherwise.
No, I think Eliza covered all the critical points. The diagnostic journey for a lot of our rare diseases, particularly ones with the genetic aspect, is problem across all of our diseases. We hear very similar things in the neurologic rare diseases, right? Where there's this we call this diagnostic odyssey of trying to figure out what is actually the root cause. And so I do think as a patient group, the encouragement of trying to look at diagnostic opportunities is extremely informative and plays an important role of this because that then identifies the actual trial population, and is extremely informative to us to be able to make sure we have enough patients to be able to run our trials and to really think about what can be done in our clinical trials by knowing what is the actual prevalence. So you are not alone in the diagnostic odyssey. A lot of diseases do that. I know that's not an acceptable answer, but know that you can help inform that growth of how to really have those conversations, which, as you have been saying that you guys have done, I think our opening remarks really share how advocating for yourselves and helping to minimize that diagnostic journey is really important. And so I think definitely the community is the best way to start with that.
Sure. We have a couple of questions in the Q&A here. Sharon, do we still have time for one or two questions?
Let's take one question. I think we have maybe about a minute. We're running a little late, but there's such a fruitful conversation. I wonder if you can answer the question by Alex Wanile, who is a patient.
Sure. So let me read that. So Alex is saying there's like a two-part question. So what is something simple I can do at my local transplant hospital that leverages all the work the FDA has done? Get a PFDD kidney transplant group, and how can we expand the pool of known MAC1 or ADTKD patients through genetic testing?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with that a bit. We actually have had a solid organ transplant patient-focused drug development meeting. I want to say 2016 or 17. So we have had one. It was one of our actual required ones that we led. And I very much remember it because my dissertation was in kidney transplant patients and their post-care. So I remember being a part of that one. very much. And I also quickly looked up this morning before joining. We have had some other patient-focused drug development meetings in the kidney disease space, including, while this is not polycystic kidney disease, there has been that one and some other of the more rare ones. So I think opportunities through patient listening sessions is something that can be done through the community as well. Is there a need for an externally led PFDD meeting? I don't want to speak for Eliza, but I'm sure her office would be extremely supportive of those kind of informative informations. I think it's great that you want to include your local level transplant centers, because this is where, the trials are going to potentially be happening. So I think by sharing, some of our working that we're doing, Eliza was great to highlight our ARC program that talks about how we've been able to make regulatory decisions with rare disease data, which is often extremely limited, and how do we handle that. I think pulling out some of the voice and patient reports or patient listening summaries that have already existed in other kidney diseases, and of how that is extremely informative, and why this is informative to our communities, that we care about our rare kidney diseases, and we need to know this information, or some other ways. But I also turn it over to Eliza from that more clinical perspective of what would be helpful for other physicians.
Yeah, and what I would focus on is really, and it gets back to sort of, I think what Richard quoted Anna saying, which is, find the patients, and she'll find the cure for you, right? And I think that if you can find the patients with this disease, it'll make innovation in this space, much easier. It'll help attract industry if you can show that, that the patients are out there, that they're engaged, that they've been diagnosed. And in terms of how to make all that happen, I would say you have a wonderful organization here, right? I keep saying the acronym wrong. I confuse the letters. I'll try to get the acronym right, RKDF. But I think that they will be a tremendously important focal point. And it would also just encourage you all to really get educated about clinical trials, to make sure you understand what they're about, your questions are answered. And really, as Michelle noted, you're going to be critical in designing these studies. You got to make sure that you want to participate them, and you will be critical in terms of your participation as well, in terms of these observational studies, these registries, because that's really going to help us understand and give the toolkit needed to advance innovation. And so I think we've taken up too much of your time, but appreciate your letting us learn from you all.
Thanks so much, Eliza and Michelle, for the wonderful talks and gracious presence. And I want to thank everybody for the invitation to moderate this panel. And I'll turn this over to Sharon.
Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry, we could have talked more about this, and this is the first, not the last conversation. So thank you for joining us. We're running a little late, but I think it was important that we take folks' questions. But next, I'd like to switch now. So we talked about the critical role, and I think Eliza teed it up nicely for us. The critical role of patient registries in learning about ADTKD and in helping to find a treatment. So what are patient registries and why are they important? That's what Catherine and Kendra are going to talk to us today about. So Kendra Kidd is an associate research with the Rare Inherited Kidney Disease Research Team at Wake Forest University. She's going to describe the International ADTKD Registry, which she established at Wake Forest University, and its role in advancing research and preparing for a clinical trial. And then Catherine Blakesley, Dr. Blakesley, is the head of strategy and operations for the biotech firm Atlantis Ventures NewCo. She'll share findings from an important study to illustrate the role that the registry has already played in research that is foundational to an eventual critical trial. So clinical trial, a critical clinical trial. How about that? All right. And then Dr. Blakesley, Catherine, will facilitate a conversation with Kendra and with any questions we may have from the audience. So with that, let me turn it over to Kendra.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Okay, let me get my slides going. Let's see. And let's see. All right, are you seeing my presentation?
I can see it, Kendra.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so thank you, Sharon, Rich, and Arcadia for this opportunity today to present about patient registries and why they're important, and Catherine for joining me in this conversation. So for my first slide, I borrowed this from CPATH and NORD because I thought it was just a great visual about how patient registries are truly the key to understanding a rare disease like ADTKD, and that every single person that's part of the registry is valuable. Their data is invaluable to us. It builds our knowledge of how ADTKD progresses, how prevalent it is, and then, we're learning what we can measure for a future trial to show that the drug is working. And so when we're talking about the ADTKD registry, what we're talking about is the Wake Forest ADTKD registry. And how you join this is by enrolling in our research study. And this research study and registry started in 2002 when Dr. Blyer and his team identified UMOD as one of the genes that cause ADTKD. And so when you enroll in this study, the data that you give us is, or that you offer to us and share with us, is the registry itself. So, if you're not part of our study already, you would contact us and our coordinators will work with you about where you are with your IKD journey, if you need genetic testing, and then also how to gather that information and share information with us. If you've already joined our study at Wake Forest, then you're in the ADTKD registry. And if you have questions about that, or again, if you're not enrolled already, please contact us and we'd love to talk to you about this. Okay. Let's see, where are we at? Okay. One thing I wanted to touch on is, we realize that when you enroll with our study and are part of our registry, that you're sharing really sensitive information with us. And one of our highest priorities is to make sure that data that you share with us and you're trusting us with is secure and safe. And so all of your data remains confidential. And your data is maintained and secured on in a HIPAA compliant manner. None of your labs or genetic testing are entered into your medical record or connected to your medical record in any way. And we cannot give information to anybody about you or your results. And likewise, we don't give information to any insurance companies either. Any data that we do share with companies like Catherine's or teams like Anna Greca's or Stan Kmock's team is all anonymous. And so this means the data that's shared cannot be traced back to you. So there's not even dates associated with when a creatinine was measured. And when we do share this information, we go through an approval process with our institution. We talk to our ethics board and our contracts team about the data that we would like to share, how it's going to be used by the other group. And once we share that information, how they're going to store it. Because once we share it, we want to make sure that your data is safe there too. Because again, like we know, it's a relationship of how, you're trusting us with this information to use it appropriately. And we want to make sure that, we keep that safe. So our study itself, when you enroll into it, it's called the Characterization of Individuals with Inherited Kidney Disease. And it's designed this way to be able to enroll people at any stage of their journey to be able to find answers. And so the first aim is to identify cause of inherited kidney disease in families. And when we're talking about ADTKD today, mostly with individuals who have UMOD or MUC1 mutations, we do have patients that and their families that enroll with us that don't have UMOD or MUC1 mutations, but we still want to be able to give them answers. And like Dr. Zhivna presented yesterday, there's other ways that we work to be able to provide that. So if there's a negative testing result, we don't just stop there and say, well, you don't have UMOD or MUC1, it just ends. We keep working to find those answers. Okay, so then aims 2 and 3 of our study are really where we start building our registry with collecting clinical and genetic data so that we can better understand and describe the disease, and also collect samples like urine and blood samples for to create our biobank for future clinical trial preparedness. So our registry in 2015, I moved it from a very large Excel sheet to REDCap, which is a platform designed for clinical trials developed by Vanderbilt University, and it's a HIPAA compliant secured system. So each participant has a registry record, and this contains like all of your clinical data. It contains your genetic testing data, as well as every single sample that you've sent to us and where we've sent it and what we've done with it. And all that data is collected into our registry. And again, we work with our regulatory agencies within our institution to make sure we're meeting all of our policies and everything for governing human research. And then when we're sharing this with collaborators and companies like Atlas, um, and Catherine will talk about that very soon. We want to make sure that we're doing this because that's how we learn more about the disease, is we're collecting this information and we use it, but we also want to share this so that we can expand our knowledge about ADTKD. A lot of you are already in our study, and I just wanted to show you that over time we have collected and processed in our little group over 7,300 samples over the last 30 years. And this is thanks to our participants and our collaborators. Our Wake Forest studies, our samples are processed for genetic testing and our biobank. We've also had other studies like a vitamin D study and the urine study with Catherine's company, and also our most recently, the Optimum study with CPATH. It's funded by the FDA that Aliza was talking about. But another set that we do is we also coordinate MUC1 testing with the Broad Clinical Lab. And in this, we're accepting and processing DNA samples for collaborators so that they're able to access MUC1 testing for their patients. So these are samples that are coming into us, but these patients are not enrolled into our study. So it's kind of like a separate cohort that we call the collaborator cohort. And so when we look at our total registry of ADTKD patients, for our consented Wake Forest group, we have 1,243 people who've been genotyped and shared data with us that have ADTKD. And in our collaborator cohort, we have 916 individuals, which is over 2,100 people that we know worldwide that have ADTKD. And if you look at our graphs below of individuals and families we're identifying year by year for UMOD and MUC1, it's continually growing. We haven't stopped finding people. So we know these families are out there. And this is why we have this huge shared goal with RKDF and other groups. We want to continue identifying and finding these families and spreading our outreach to find this and keep increasing our numbers, right? And also, a really great milestone, I started in 2012 when MUC1 was first identified. And in 12 years later, 13 years later, in 2025, we hit a milestone of 1,000 individuals who have been identified with ADTKD MUC1. And so that's been really great. And of course, we want to keep, increasing those numbers. And then I just wanted to take a moment to talk about our other ADTKD teams that we collaborate with. I tried to list as many as I could here. It's not everybody, but we have groups that we work with who have their own cohorts for their country, or they're a team that's developing these amazing cell and animal models looking at ADTKD, and also groups that are looking at biomarkers that we can use for clinical trial. And so, collectively, we have over 2,000 patients. We have these great groups and all these decades worth of data that have led to over 150 publications about ADTKD. And every group and every day we're working on these, and these publications lead us to closer to this cure. And I just also want to highlight that this wouldn't be possible without our patient registry. Our patient registry allows us to correlate what's found in an animal and what's found in a cell model with what we're seeing in patients and how we can translate this into a clinical trial. And so going towards clinical trials, Aliza in their session before us did a really great job with this. But I just wanted to highlight that with clinical trial preparedness, that a natural history study is necessary. And this is something that's running parallel to research teams like Dr. Greca's that are finding these exciting therapies. And the natural history study is going to use the patient registry data to answer these questions that I've listed here about progression and prevalence, and most importantly, how many people would be available for a clinical trial. And what we're doing with our natural history studies is we have, so CPATH was awarded this great study with the FDA for ADTKD, and we're working with them, and we're really excited about this opportunity. And so we've worked with CPATH to develop IRB protocols, data sharing agreements, and plans about how to utilize the registry that we already have for these natural history studies that are going to be used for future FDA applications. And so our part of this study with CPATH and FDA is what we call the optimum study, and it's 3 parts. The first part's a really big part, which is our patient registry that many of you are in. So you're part of this fundamental, amazing, study that we're doing with, CPATH is going to be modeling this data to do these natural history studies. And so we've already shared anonymous data with 1,200 people to begin modeling. It's included over 10,000 serum creatinine measurements, as well as other factors that, we've shared. And then there's also a perspective side to this. So that means that individuals are in a study right now and collecting data every 3 months. And so that we can model that, see how that applies to what we found in the retrospective group, but it's also preparing us for the future, right? So that we kind of are already starting to get prepared of what would a trial look like in the, and how can we organize this and our data and things like that on kind of administrative things on our side, right? And then another part is the elastography study, which is a new study to see if measuring fibrosis of the kidney through ultrasound could be used as a factor for progression or within a trial. So it's really exciting. Hopefully I hope next year we'll to share more information about what we've learned with the Optimum trial next year. And for this, you have to travel to Wake Forest and Winston-Salem and for the procedure and meet our team and meet Dr. Blyer, and it's really great. We've had 46 people already and their spouse and about 7 spouses, and it's just really great. So again, why I should join the registry. Again, going back to that idea of the key, joining the registry helps us to unlock this idea, this ADTKD to find a cure, and you'll also be part of these natural history studies that are needed to take us to a clinical trial and take, us to the next level to find a cure. And again, I just want to say, and I can't stress this enough, and I speak for our team here at Wake Forest, that many of you are already part of our study and our registry, and we thank you for your participation and your willingness to share your information with us, provide samples, and have us use your data for these natural history studies. And we wouldn't be where we are today without all of these patients willing to work with us. And also we have all these other things that come along with it. So if you have any questions, please ask us. We'd love to talk to you about it. And then this is our team, Dr. Blyer, myself, Abby and Lauren have been with us for about 10 years. They're our family coordinators. Shariana and Stephanie have been hired for our Optimum study, and they're really great as well. And then Antonio, he's our laboratory coordinator. So he processes our samples and makes sure they get to all the places they need to go and they get all the testing they need and that you get your results back. So that's where I am. I tried to speed through all of that because I know we're kind of behind on time. So I'm going to stop sharing right now, if that's okay.
Thank you, Kendra. Kendra, can you see my slides?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Sorry, one second. So, Kendra and I have been working together for, I think, close to a decade. And I was actually on the research side of things and now have jumped over to the company side of things, which has been really special and unique to connect even deeper to the patient population. And I wanted to share how the registry in action is helping to move towards a treatment. And I think Kendra had mentioned this early in the presentation regarding the urine collection study, which I'll talk about quickly, and then maybe we can get into some of the Q&A because I'm sure there's probably a lot of questions about how the registry helps inform research, biomarker development, understanding disease progression, but as well as helping us advance to a clinical trial. So one of the things that we had done in 2022 and into 2023 is we did a non-interventional urine study. What that means is that we didn't administer any drug, we just collected urine. And this was really sort of a proof of concept in terms of not only how we can recruit in this rare disease population, but also um, that we can actually, what we would be collecting for is helping to understand the disease progression and how biomarkers or how we can understand how the treatment is working once we get there. So again, we were able to recruit 26 patients, and maybe some of you are on this call today, so thank you so much for participating in that. We did that in 3 months, which is just tremendous. Um, the registry data, as I had mentioned, helps us to understand the disease progression and also how to measure if a treatment is working. And so this in future treatments, again, we'll be able to see how urine or other biomarkers might be able to detect whatever drug that we administer, how effective it is. And I just wanted to say thank you because all of you who are out participating, the patients that are on this call, help us move closer to treatment. And I'll go to the next slide. Again, this is sort of just at a high level, patients in registry, moving towards those research studies. So as Kendra was mentioning, all the studies that they're doing as part of their registry, as well as what we're doing from the company lens of these non-interventional, no drug being administered trials, and then moving to help inform smarter trial design. I think Eliza Thompson and the team had highlighted that earlier. And then obviously developing treatment. So all of you are helping to power this path forward to develop a treatment. That's all I have today. Again, I don't want to add too much, but I know that there's probably some burning questions about when a clinical trial is happening. And again, I think Kendra did a really good job at articulating why it's impactful to join this registry, just beyond collecting your data, how it's used and how it's utilized, not only from a Wake Forest and research standpoint, but again, from the company side or the biotech side about later trial design. Um, so I'll stop there and see if there's any questions from the team or from any of the audience participation today. I think I saw one in the.
Let me go ahead and ask, since you brought it up, to tee it up. We did hear from Anna yesterday, 3 to 5 years, hopefully, before one or two clinical trials would get underway, which is not to say, then you've got to run the clinical trial, and that's years as well. But we asked a lot of folks, when folks registered, we said, what questions do you have for panelists? And by far, the most common question asked by at least 15, 20 individuals was, what is the timeline for a treatment? What is the timeline for a cure? And just basically, around that. And if you could answer what you can answer, given the stage of to Anna's point, things stepping forward, stepping back, and it's a dynamic, moving, lots of moving pieces. But what can you say to answer that question?
Yeah, I think Anna did a really good job yesterday at articulating, sort of the mountain. It's climbing a mountain. It's a humbling experience. Drug discovery is not a linear path, and we've learned that. I've especially learned that being in this role. What I can say without putting any concrete parameters around actual dates or years is that there's a tremendous amount of work underway aimed at developing a treatment for ADTKD. Our goal is the goal of, I think, many shared stakeholders and everyone on this call is to move, as urgently as possible to, do the work that needs to be done and bring a safe therapy to patients. I think Anna had mentioned also too yesterday is, there's talks and you take, one step forward, two steps back, three steps forward. So again, drug discovery is definitely not linear. I think one encouraging aspect of working in rare disease, and I think Eliza could probably answer this too, is that once we have something that's ready to go to the clinic, is that it can move, I think, a little bit more efficiently than other disease indications being in the rare disease because you don't really need as much, you don't need a large sample size. There have already been early conversations, I will say, from our end with the FDA around potential clinical plans, which I think helps lay the groundwork later on for once we're ready to go into the clinic and a therapy is ready to be tested in patients. And I think, as I mentioned, with the urine collection study, that was a really proof of concept that we were able to tap into this registry and enroll patients in 3 months, 26 patients, which is just, again, tremendous. Um, Again, I think that said, and Anna did a really good job at articulating this, is that drug development is a step-by-step process, right? And the most important thing is making sure that we get it right. Um, I know waiting is incredibly hard, and I'm deeply aware of that. But I will say is that, the urgency that you feel, we feel on the company side. So that's something that motivates us every day in terms of moving closer to a treatment. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, it is. Um, I say with a sigh, but I think, I mean, it was very helpful to hear from Elisa and from Elisa on the timeline, what it does take, and yet then also for Michelle, the role of the patient. So let me just ask quickly, and then we'll see if there's other questions. Um, what would you say then is the most critical role of patients? I mean, what can we do at this point in addition to constantly reminding you that we're waiting for a treatment?
No, I think your voice, I will say you guys have the foundation and the patient community behind this has just been tremendous and has fueled, I think, a lot of the work that's being done and the speed at which things are being done. I'd say keep doing what you're doing. Kendra did a good job at trying to articulate, just joining the registry. I mean, that's really powering the information and knowledge of this disease area, being a rare disease and the testing and diagnostics, which again, I think have really come a long way in the past decade, as you saw from those charts from Kendra's graphs. It's really great to see those numbers grow every year because, again, I think, while it's rare, we don't think it's as rare, right? It's just we need to inform and mobilize and educate and get folks into that registry because once we're ready, it will be great to tap into that for the future clinical trial.
So is it fair to say, without us patients and our data,
Right.
there is no information, there is no clinical trial?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I think the ADTKD community is just absolutely amazing. Like you all are just so motivated and willing to, like I said, fill out surveys. And if
Mm.
you're able to be part of these trials, like the urine collection study or the optimum prospective trial, we've had people, they're traveling to see us to do these ultrasounds. And it's just amazing. And I think, and as we've talked, Wake Forest and RKDF and Broad and with Catherine's company, finding new patients. So the outreach to because we know, like you said, we know these other families are out here. It's just a matter of tapping in and finding those finding that path to those other families. So I think, yeah. That'd be
Okay.
great. Yeah, keep increasing those numbers. And we'll try too. But, working together, I think we'll be able to. Yeah.
Yeah,
We
I think Kendra.
absolutely value our partnership. Go ahead, real quick.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that highlights it is that everybody on this call, every panelist, every participant that's, joining today, you're really a partner in making this happen, a cure, a treatment. We can't do it without one another. And I really feel like that's something that's been such a good motivator to this group and this disease population. I mean, we've brought in patient days. I remember that at the Broad, we had those early patient days. I mean, we can't do it without one another. And I feel like we've really been partners in this. I mean, Kendra and I have been working together for over a decade. And,
Yeah.
the urine collection study was not without its trials and tribulations, but we learned so much about how to go into the clinical trial. We learned learnings about how, it would operate and the mechanics of it, but we also learned a lot from the patients too. So it's really, I mean, it's an incredible community. I think that this community is really special.
So we do have one question. I'll go ahead and take care of it, Suzanne. From our audience. James wants to know how many people have registered abroad.
That's a great
That's a good
question.
question. Sorry, I don't have that information, but I can get that to you, Sharon, for your questions. So, the information that we did share with CPAT that's part of the retrospective study, we do have patients. The large part of our patients are in the United States and they're geographically dispersed. So that brings its own special we something to work with looking at clinical trials going forward. But we worked through that with the urine collection study. Like patients were sending stuff to us. We were sending them kits. They were sending them back like the next day. It was very rigorous and it worked. Anyway, but we do have patients that are in other countries that are enrolled with us. And so I can get those numbers together for you. And then also in the EU, Jan Halbritter, they have ADTKD ERCnet, I think it's for, and they're starting their putting together, their own European registry and getting those patients together and setting up, a registry and a biobanking system. And it's really amazing. Yeah. So.
And we do have one other question in the chat. Maybe Suzanne, if you can see that.
Yes, sure. Are you seeing that the age of onset decreases in subsequent generations? And I think Kendra?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. So that's something that we've looked at. I don't want to say officially, but that's something that's definitely part of our analysis plan with CPATH and our natural history study with them. So that's one of the main questions for our initial statistical analysis is to look at that, if there's any changes with, between generations like that, where it's an earlier onset. Yeah, but that's a really great question.
It's a great question. And it really illustrates that your research plan, what you want to do with the optimum study and, the 150 plus studies already with partners around the world, it informs basic science that will also help clinical trial. But it also, it's these questions that we have, will my children get diagnosed younger than I will? And, will their progression, thankfully mine has been long and delayed. I've been in stage 4 for 10 years. Is that likely to be what their experience will be? So I love that what you're looking at is critical information for both the science, the treatment, and the questions that we as patients want to know. So let me just, on behalf of all of us patients, thank you for being so mindful of what we're worried about, what we're concerned about as well. And I think with that, and if there are any other questions that come in, we will answer them after the fact. Kendra, I'll get the information from you about international numbers.
Yeah, of course.
And we will post that. So thank you all for your questions. And we'll move on to our next session.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next session is a break, and we're running a little bit behind, but we still want to give you a 10-minute break. So we'll see you back here at about 11:55. And I do have a slide here that tells you a little bit more about us that I would like to share. So, take a look at our website and during our 10 minutes after your comfort break, and we'll see you back in 10 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. We're in the home stretch here. Thank you for staying with us and listening to all the wonderful speakers and presentations and ideas that we've got going today. So this morning we learned about the importance of genetic testing for learning about this disease and for a potential pool for when it's time for a clinical trial. And this afternoon we're going to hear from 3 experts on things to think about when you're considering genetic testing. We know some folks, think it's the greatest idea since sliced bread and can't wait to do it. Others are a little more hesitant. And so we just want to provide a forum for a discussion about genetic testing and an opportunity for you to ask your questions and get them answered. So first we're going to hear from Dr. Hila Milo Rasuli. And Dr. Milo Rasuli is an assistant professor of medical sciences and the associate director of education for the Center for Precision Medicine and Genomics at Columbia University. She is a genetic counselor with a PhD in genetics and genomics of kidney disease. Her research is focused on the implementation of genetic testing in nephrology. And let me just go ahead and introduce all of our speakers, and then you can just present one after the other. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Jacob Neisather. Dr. Neisather is an assistant professor of medicine and clinical nephrology at the University of Cincinnati and is the adult nephrologist at Cincinnati Children's Tuberous Sclerosis Center of Excellence. Dr. Neisather holds a special interest in cystic and genetic kidney diseases. And finally, last but not least, we'll hear again from Maggie Westmeyer. If you joined yesterday, she had some wonderful comments as well for the scientific community. So as you may know, Maggie is a genetic counselor and director of clinical genetic services in Oregon Health at Natera, a genetic testing company. Natera offers genetic testing for nearly 400 genetic diseases in a single panel called Renasight. We'll hold questions until after the panel, and let me have you turn it over to you, Hila.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you for the introduction. So let me start by sharing my slides. Okay, so as Sharon said, I'm Hila Milo Rasuli. I'm working at Columbia University, and it's really my pleasure to be here again this year. So I'm a genetic counselor. I do not have ADTKD, but I will share with you our perspective from the genetic side on the impact of a genetic diagnosis, so a bit different from the impact we heard earlier, the familial impact, and some personalized treatment hopes, as we heard this morning a lot. And then in case you do not yet have a genetic diagnosis, but you found your way to this meeting today, the differences between clinical and research genetic testing, what to expect from a genetic counseling session, and finally, how to find a genetic counselor. So I'd like to highlight that when we think about a genetic diagnosis, it has multiple different potential impacts, and the motivations that of clinicians and patients are somehow overlapping, but not always identical. And it's part of the role of the clinician to ask for the patient's motivations, but they don't always do that. So you may want to share with your doctor what your goals are. As you can see here, we highlight the eligibility for clinical trials, as we're thinking in the future for clinical trials for ADTKD. It's going to be really important to have a genetic diagnosis. We can also determine the risk to family members using genetic testing, and we have access to a wonderful community like this one. So genetic counselors are here to help with familial communication, which is often one of the barriers for more genetic testing. So as we heard this morning, the disease is often inherited from one generation to another. And even if you have symptoms of kidney disease and your dad had a transplant, you may hear professionals telling you that this is not an inherited disease, which I find amazing. And then once you do find a genetic counselor and identify the genetic cause for your disease, you may have to find yourself in a position where you are the person explaining the disease to your family members and why genetic testing would be relevant. And maybe they don't have any symptoms yet, or maybe they have some symptoms, but they're a bit afraid of having a genetic test. So genetic counselors can really facilitate this discussion with your family members and guide you. So what are the potential reasons for people who don't have yet any symptom to get tested? So one reason is just to know whether they're at risk. And the other is living donor transplant evaluation. So let's assume that we have a patient here, a man in the bottom in black, and he needs a kidney. But his siblings are afraid. They don't know if they're also going to develop the disease. And so they're worried about donating their kidney to their brother. Doing a genetic test could really identify whether they have a risk or not for the disease that is running in the family. And if they don't, then they can donate their kidney without worry. And so that's really one of the strengths of genetic testing, is that it can provide a clear, final negative result, meaning that you do not have a risk and you can move forward and potentially help family members who have the disease. I want to highlight the genetic testing of minors is not recommended unless there is a treatment for the child. So the child best interests are the gold standard, are really the central thing we need to think about, the child's physical and psychosocial well-being. There are also risks of genomic privacy that I'll discuss, and the question of the right to not know. Maybe it's a bit too much for a child to know at an early age that they're going to develop a disease, or maybe it's going to be complicated in terms of siblings relationship if one knows that they inherited it and the other knows that they didn't, whether the child who did not inherit the disease will feel guilty that they don't have it and that their sibling got it, or the sibling who got the disease will be jealous of the sibling who did not. So really thinking about also the family dynamics is part of the role of a genetic counselor. The genetic testing is really recommended only if it's going to impact the child's medical care, and it might. In the future, we might have a treatment that is recommended very early on, even before the child has any symptom, to prevent the disease. And in that case, it will become recommended to test minors, but it's not the case right now. Just the parents wanting to know if the kid has the disease or not is not a recognized reason to test a minor. And again, genetic counselors can help with the discussion. I would say that once we reach kids who are teenagers, the discussion is a bit different because teenagers have a lot of their own opinions, and it's not just only the parent who has to decide. It's also a discussion with the teenager. And genetic counselors can definitely help with the discussion here. So I said that I will touch on the genomic privacy issue. So there is in the United States specifically a law called the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, also known as GINA. It's a federal law. It was adopted in 2008 under the Bush administration. It protects against genetic-based discrimination in two contexts. One is employment. So it cannot be part of the decision-making for hiring, firing, promotions, or benefits. It prohibits employers from requiring, requesting, or conditional approval or employment on the submission of genetic information or familial medical history. Okay, so we have to remember, we may not have a genetic test, but we know that we have a lot of family members with ADTKD or another disease. We don't have to share this information with our employer. And in terms of health insurance, it protects in terms of eligibility, benefits, and premiums. And it's also supported by the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, that health insurance are not allowed to ask for this type of information. However, GINA has significant limitations. First of all, it's only if the employer has at least 15 employees. It does not currently include life, long-term, and disability insurance. And it applies only to pre-symptomatic individuals, so people who do not have the condition, because the people who do have already a kidney disease are under another act, the American Disability Act. Now, I want to highlight the GINA benefits as well as the limitations in the US. I want to mention that in other countries, in Europe especially, there are great laws that are even beyond the GINA, and there are laws and benefits that other lawmakers found to allow life, long-term, and disability insurance for people with genetic diseases. And I think part of the role of group like this one is to try and push for the legislators to create better laws to protect people with inherited diseases as well as their family members. As you heard this morning, I'm not going to repeat it over and over. A genetic diagnosis can really pave the way to personalized care. So as you heard, the more patients that are out there, and we know that there are a lot of people with ADTKD who are not diagnosed, either because their nephrologist is not ordering genetic tests, is not aware of ADTKD, any reason. But the more patients out there, the more incentive for pharma to develop therapies, because it tells them how many patients are going to use their treatment that they're developing. As we heard, clinical trials need participants. And so the more people with the genetic diagnosis, the more potential participants, knowing that the clinical trials always have some eligibility criteria. And so age might be an eligibility criteria. So if everybody is diagnosed very late or at older age, then they might not be eligible. And so we need more people being diagnosed. And as we heard again, being part of patients' registries really empowers the participants' organization to advocate on your behalf, both for pharma and for researchers and for legislators. One of the things that we are really pushing with the National Kidney Foundation and the American Kidney Fund is to get genetic counseling covered by Medicare, Medicaid, so private insurance will pay for genetic counseling services and will not be out of pocket. I would just say that the genetic counselor is not a surgeon. It's much less expensive than what you might think. Okay, so I wanted just to highlight that there's a difference between genetic testing through research and clinical genetic testing. You heard when there was a discussion earlier about the research testing that it gives you all kinds of protections and HIPAA and on the other hand, it has some limitations as well. So the goal of a clinical genetic test is to elucidate the patient's disease etiology. It's real patient focus. It's not there to help the community in general. It's for you as a patient. It has a high sensitivity and specificity to the patient's condition, assuming that the correct test is ordered. So if one of our genetic counselors is seeing a patient that has symptoms that look like, or family history that look like ADTKD, they would make sure that not only UMOD is tested, but also MOD1. The results are placed in medical records, so all your doctors, it will be shared with the entire medical team and everybody will be aware of it. Anonymized data might be shared with researchers and pharmaceutical companies, and that depends a lot on the consent. On the other side, the goal of research is to increase general knowledge. And so the sensitivity and specificity depends on the research aims. The results are not always returned. It's actually quite, expensive to return results. It's usually not shared with the medical team, but similarly, the anonymized data can be shared. So if you haven't seen a genetic counselor yet, what would you expect from a genetic counseling session? So there are 4 main steps in a genetic counseling session, starting with collection of medical history. So it's a meeting with a genetic counselor. You're going to talk, coming with as much information about your personal medical history is going to be helpful. It then collects family history about your family members' medical history. And genetic counselors are trying to collect information for 3 generations. So not just your parents and your kids and your siblings, but also your grandparents. And so asking your family members about their conditions and their situation is really important to help with the productivity of the genetic counseling session. Then the genetic counselors, based on their knowledge, are going to estimate the probability that it is a genetic disease and formulate a differential diagnosis, consider the probability of a genetic diagnosis, and finally discuss with you the test, its purpose, the potential results, the impact on management, and the process of how to do the test and return the results. And you're going to sign an informed consent. Sorry. So how do you find a genetic counselor? In the United States, there is a website that's called Find a Genetic Counselor, where you can put your state. You can say that you want a genetic counselor who is specialized in nephrology, and it will give you names and phone and emails. In the world more broadly, there is a website called Orphanet, which has expert centers listed there. And you can see that there are many different countries that are participating in Orphanet, and you can find a genetic counselor who is specialized in rare kidney diseases or maybe even ADTKD. I just want to put a plug in, since I'm from Colombia. We actually can see patients from many different states. All the states here in blue can be seen by our genetic counselors, Natalie Vina and Liv Palma. And we have an amazing clinical team of physicians. We have a very simple way of requesting an appointment. If you go on our website, or you can call us, and just the Scan Me Here is the request form that you would get if you press on the request an appointment. So with that, I would like to thank you all, and thanks to all my colleagues. You're more than welcome to reach out to me if you have more questions. Thank you. And Jacob, I think I'm just passing it to you, and we'll have questions after.
Just making sure everybody's able to see my slides.
Yes.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Well, thank you again for inviting me to talk a little bit about how to approach genetic testing with your provider. So there is a little bit of overlap overall. Again, highlighting the importance of a lot of this discussion that's happened throughout today, but hopefully we can kind of walk through on ways to approach. So the main goal of the next 10 minutes or so is to really recognize that genetic testing is an option for either you or a loved one's care, and how to approach that conversation with your healthcare provider. So overall, what we'll cover today is, we won't spend too much time or really much time at all on what is genetic testing, but why does it matter for kidney disease as a whole? Preparing for that conversation, and then during and after your visit. So as an example, let's meet Tara. So maybe we can identify with Tara, or maybe know somebody who has a similar situation. So Tara's a 28-year-old woman who loves music and creating portraitures. She's actively involved in her 5-year-old son's school chaperoning trips, and volunteering to assist with other school activities. Tara routinely follows up with her primary care provider and receives positive feedback about her health. But on her most recent visit, she recently underwent her routine blood testing and was found to have concern for chronic kidney disease. She's referred to a kidney specialist to investigate further. So, like many, she's worried about what this could mean. Often it's left pretty wide open. So, the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is just preparing ourselves for the conversation and the appointment. What do we do beforehand? So first, let's make sure we have our medical records, whether it's us within the health system. That way, the provider we're seeing is able to review and have all that information available. Again, that's something that we may not be able to get or know what to provide, but it is something that we would request our primary care doc or other provider to help supply this information. Gather the family history and note those who have kidney disease, who are on dialysis, who's had a transplant, high blood pressure, diabetes, and ideally 3 generations is as best as possible. But again, really think outside as well. We may not think that joint pain is something relevant, but it's something that is very pertinent to some of these genetic conditions that are related to the kidneys and within this organization itself. So even if it doesn't seem like it might be relevant, it's still important to try and gather that information and include that in the discussion going forward. Write down your questions. It may not be more than 1 or 2 questions. It may be 50 questions. Really, we really want you to take that initiative and bring to the appointment what you value most. Again, it's okay if we rehearse the questions ahead of time. It allows us to, as a patient and even a provider, to get where we're really coming from with our concerns or our questions. And then bring a support individual, whether it's a friend or a family member, somebody who can help remember some of that information, ask questions that you rehearsed beforehand, and even provide emotional support. Now, you don't have to have all the answers. It's okay. Even a partial history or some partial answers, whatever time you spent preparing is good enough. So we're going to continue on Tara's journey. After her recent news, she meets with her friends and family for support and talks about her new results. She learns that she had an aunt who was previously passed away, required dialysis at an early age, but doesn't know much else. One of her friends mentioned the idea of genetic testing as an advertisement was seen when she was taking a family member herself to a recent appointment. So why does genetic testing matter? Okay. So when we are talking about kidney disease and genetic kidney disease in particular, up to 30% of patients who have chronic kidney disease may be of a genetic cause. Now, 50% of patients who have already had a biopsy or already had a diagnosis may be altered or reclassified to some degree based on a genetic testing. And then a pretty powerful statistic here is 90% of patients who have had genetic testing can see a change in their management after a genetic diagnosis. That could include something as far as medications, starting or stopping, could be in results to family members care and involved with our family history, as well as transplantation. So again, just highlighting some of the important factors that have already been mentioned throughout today's talks. Some common genetic diseases. I know ADTKD is one that's near and dear to our hearts here, but there's a wide range of genetic kidney diseases that are out there that maybe not for ourselves, but maybe we can help advocate for one of our friends or other family members in those conversations. So, when would you consider genetic testing from a kidney perspective? Family history, unexplained kidney disease without a clear cause, early onset, other concerns for or genetic signs. Are kidney functions declining fairly rapidly, or others that have maybe a higher risk that we've noted throughout? So, continuing Tara's journey, the day of the appointment comes. Tara's nervous, but she's prepared because of the advice that her friends and family ahead of her visit. So, an important question is, how can I make the most out of my appointment? Be open and honest. Share your concerns. Really have an open discussion with your provider so that way they can see the whole picture. If you don't understand anything that I'm saying or your provider saying, please ask for clarification. It's not that we don't want you to understand. It's oftentimes we just need to find the right way to communicate what we're trying to say. So please tell us to take a moment to pause, just ask for clarification. Again, highlighting those important questions first. Use your support person and take notes or record the visit if the provider allows. So over the next couple slides, I have listed some key questions to ask your provider. I'm not going to read through all of these as a lot of these have already been discussed. So big ones that I just want to touch on are just asking something simple as, could my kidney disease have a genetic cause? Talking a little bit about that process of what does testing a genetic test look like? And then how is it covered? What were we going to do with the results? And what about genetic counselors? Before, after, during? All these are important questions we can ask. Again, similarly, should we talk about family members? And then what if no treatments are available? Remember, there's no bad questions if your provider, there are no bad questions. If your provider uses a word you don't know, again, please just take that moment to say, hey, can I have some clarification, please? And overall, some good ways to start that conversation because your provider may not bring that up. It's okay if you are the one to initiate that conversation. I've been reading about the genetic testing for kidney disease. Is this an opportunity to help understand my condition a little bit better? Several patients in my family have kidney disease. Could it be genetic? Would it impact my overall care? And if you think testing is appropriate, are you able to order it for me or refer me to somebody who might be able to help me through that conversation, whether it's appropriate or not? Some common barriers that we talk about. My provider hasn't mentioned it. As I said, it's okay. It's all right to bring it up yourself. Providers appreciate an engaged patient. I'm worried about the cost. Many of these tests are covered by insurances. There are multiple companies out there that offer assistance. I'm scared of what the results might show, but the more we know, the more it is empowering. Again, it's part of the conversation that we want to have during that visit of what's important to you and what it means for your care overall, as well as your family. Okay. And then an important thing here, my provider said that testing isn't needed. Well, ask why. And then we'll talk into a couple of other questions to ask from there. So if my provider says no or it's not needed, don't be discouraged. You still have options. Again, ask for the reasoning. Understand their perspective on why or why not they don't think it's an appropriate test. Request a referral for somebody who maybe sees genetic testing or a genetic specialist a little more commonly. I do have some providers that are within my group in the local region that don't understand genetic testing as a whole and often refer to me to help out within that process. So maybe we have a provider within that bucket. Seek a second opinion. It's okay to ask for another opinion. It is your health. You want to be the one to get all the right information or all the information that's available for you to make the best decision. And then our advocacy groups. So the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation, as well as numerous others, are really helpful in empowering you and the community to help within these discussions. Important to know after your visit, when are we following up? Is it going to be a few months, few weeks? How are we going to go through that? Discuss our results with your team. Are you going to give me a call? Are we going to come meet together and talk about it in person? Seek genetic counseling. Again, before, during, and after, all are appropriate times. Genetic counseling is our friend. Consider your family and talking to your family when we feel comfortable about sharing that diagnosis or something we've come across about getting tested, and then connecting with our patient organizations. So although we didn't come to an exact diagnosis for Tara's story, we noticed that she has CKD can appear unexpectedly even in healthy young patients. Family history is important, and patients themselves can initiate these conversations. So highlighting some key takeaways, genetic testing, have that open conversation with your provider. Genetic counselors are our allies and often can help find the appropriate way in those next steps, and then be open to sharing with your provider and family. So, on that note, your voice matters. You deserve answers. Start the conversation with your provider today.
Thank you, Jacob. That was a really informative talk. I'll go ahead and share my screen now.
Yes.
So I want to thank everyone for having me today. I'm Maggie Westmeyer. As I mentioned, I'm a genetic counselor, and I've worked with Natera for a number of years now. And let's see, are you seeing my screen? Okay, great. And so I just like to talk to you a bit about the Renasight genetic test that we offer at our laboratory and our genetic counseling services. So Renasight is the name of our comprehensive renal genetic panel. It's custom designed for nephrology and covers common and rare genes associated with kidney disease and includes 397 genes on the panel. It's meant for patients diagnosed with either pediatric or adult forms of kidney disease and is a simple ordering process that requires just a blood or a saliva sample with results available in about 2 to 3 weeks. We launched the test in almost 6 years ago now and have now performed over 200,000 Renasight tests, which has led to a number of diagnoses of kidney disease. So when we talk about empowering ourselves, and if our clinician isn't familiar with genetic testing, just want to make folks aware that even though Renasight is a test that does have to be ordered by a clinician, an individual can order a kit, however, to be delivered to their home, and bring that to their physician for ordering. So this is the web link for the Renasight test. Excuse me, a bit of a cold. For how to go ahead and get a kit. Just to be clear, though, this is still even though the kit can be sent, the order could not be processed without a physician order taking place. And so when we talk about the ADTKD genes that are on the Renasight panel, we do have the UMOD gene, the HNF1 beta gene, the REN gene, and the SEC61A1 gene. Currently, Renasight does not test for the MUC1 gene because this is a technically difficult gene and it's not able to be on our panel currently, so is only available through, research protocol. So at Natera, if we identify someone either after a negative Renasight test or who has a family history of MUC1, for example, we would refer them on to the research study. We refer to Dr. Blyer's lab and that sort of thing in order to make sure that folks are aware how to get that. I will mention that research and development efforts are underway, however, for MUC1, and that's something we really do hope to be able to master and add to our panel in the future. So I really am pleased to share, though, the number of diagnoses that we've made to date in these ADTKD genes. So I really hope this has had a positive impact for folks with kidney disease or a family history of kidney disease. So thus far, we've identified 683 individuals with UMOD, 1,058 individuals with HNF1 beta, 48 with the REN finding, and 10 with the SEC61A1 gene, which is a very rare form of ADTKD. So Natera does support genetic counseling sessions through my team. So I manage a team of 7 genetic counselors who are experts in renal genetic counseling. That's all that we do, is speak with patients and clinicians about genetic test results. And we also do offer pre-test sessions. So these are complimentary sessions. Patients can go online at naterasession.com to set up an appointment or call in to schedule. And just as would happen in Gila's clinic or in the clinical setting, we do summarize the conversation that we have with the patient in a clinical note, and that note is returned to your ordering clinician who ordered the Renasight test, or in order to have them be aware of the results and the discussion that took place. And so those are really the summary of the information we had. I know we've been running a little behind, so I kept my talk short this morning because Hila and Jacob covered so well all of the facets of genetic counseling for ADTKD and the benefits that genetic counselors can offer. But I would like to just second what folks have said, which is that genetic counselors are our friends. We're here to support both patients and clinicians with understanding test results. Would like to just mention again that genetic testing is affordable, it's available. Most patients have insurance coverage and do not have an out-of-pocket fee, or if they do, it's quite small. And there are compassionate programs available for testing at other labs and my laboratory as well, to help make sure that the test is affordable for folks. So with that, we can hopefully move to some Q&A.
Thank you so much for talking about genetic testing, what it entails, what to ask your provider, and basically helping to demystify all of that. I don't see questions in the Q&A yet, but we did ask folks when they registered for the summit to share any questions they might have, and so I'd like to share one of those now. One of them, so someone asked, so many rare kidney diseases begin during fetal development. Yet families often first hear about genetics only after organ damage. Why isn't there earlier diagnosis of ADTKD?
It's a great question. I would just say that most of the prenatal testing and screening prenatally are for recessive diseases, where there is a risk that both parents are carrying a gene. So there are actually in the panels for prenatal, there are some of the rare kidney diseases. Dominant diseases bring up like a different issue of actually diagnosing the parents, as opposed to only identifying them as carrying a variant associated with recessive disease. And so for reason related to how carrier testing is done and how the risks of false positive and false negative and the amount of time spent on prenatal genetic counseling, dominant diseases are usually not included. But there are some of the rare recessive diseases are on carrier panels. I would say that just for dominant disease, there are also ethical questions around what would you do with the results, and so it's an complete additional kind of worm. But for the ADTKD families, I think it's a question that you really need to say what you want, and that's I don't think anyone else can tell you what's the right decision, and then based on that, kind of move forward. For patients who have a diagnosis of ADTKD and really don't want to have the disease go to the next generation, but also would not want to do an abortion because of ADTKD, there is an option of pre-implantation testing, of doing an IVF and then testing the embryo before returning it, and only returning embryos that do not have the variant. So there is an option of not even prenatally, but pre-pregnancy, to ensure that the next generation will not have the disease. It's really a very personal decision. I would just say that in the PKD, ADPKD, autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease, there is even a foundation that is offering free pre-implantation testing because of the family's need and want. So.
Jake or Maggie, do you have anything to add to that?
No, just to support what Hila said, if an individual is diagnosed themselves and wishes to know about during pregnancy that the testing is available, that could be done after a genetic variant is confirmed in the affected person. Mm-hmm.
And I think I should probably just add that, I'm assuming that question came from someone here in the United States, because I think Europe has a different system, or different European countries, in terms of early genetic testing. It's a little more integrated into their health systems. But don't ask me to name which countries are doing what. I just know that they tend to be a little more advanced in that area, and mindful of earlier diagnoses. So thank you for that question. I don't see that we have any other questions. So I think at this point, we will turn to our next session.
Oh, I want just to point to the option for whoever was tested through Natera to have their family members tested for the variant identified in the family, very specifically. So it's really something to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the cascade testing is where we'll learn more about who in a given family, how far it goes. So thank you for that, Eva. All right. Thank you, everyone. It was a great panel. I appreciate you. Okay. Our last session here, before we wrap up, features 3 rare kidney disease volunteers. And we couldn't do what we do here at the foundation without our volunteers. We are a volunteer patient-led organization. So we're going to begin with Vincent, I believe, a longtime volunteer. Then we'll hear from Jess Leong, who joined RKDF last year after the summit. She learned about the foundation after attending the summit. She reached out, and she's been an invaluable volunteer as our social media director ever since. And then Sherry, who you saw earlier this morning with her sister Chris and her husband Dave. She's also a recent volunteer, but has done amazing things in her community on behalf of the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation. So let me see who we have here today. Maybe we'll start with Jess and then go to Sherry, and then see if Vincent can join us a little later on. So let me turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jess Leong. While I serve as a social media director for the RKDF, I'm here today first and foremost as a wife and a mother. Exactly 1 year ago, I sat where many of you are sitting now, attending the RKDF Summit for the first time. I had spent the previous week in a blur trying to process my husband's diagnosis of ADTKD UMOD. I came to last year's summit with a desperate need to understand, to find a way to support him through a journey that felt overwhelming and uncertain. And that summit changed everything for me. Hearing our researchers speak about their progress and their relentless pursuit of effective treatments didn't just give me information, it gave me a drive. For the first time since that diagnosis, I finally felt peace. I realized that we weren't alone, that we had a community that truly understands our reality. And at that point, I knew I needed to find a way to get connected. So my why is very specific. As of this past month, my husband's eGFR is at 54. So I'm fighting for him, but I'm also fighting for our 3 beautiful young children that we have. I know Dave was pretty emotional earlier, and I felt that when he was speaking about that with his kids and his grandkids, and I feel that so much too. Because of this genetic disease, there's a chance that one or more of them, our children, might have inherited it. I volunteer and serve this foundation for their futures, but also the futures of all the generations that will follow them. I want them to have a different story. I want them to journey with ADTKD to be defined by the treatments that we are working towards today. Treatments that can preserve their health and their quality of life before the disease takes hold. So going from that, what makes RKDF so unique is that we are 100% volunteer ran. Every person behind the scenes has a personal connection to this disease in one way or another. We are a family, and like any family, we support one another. The leadership board has been an incredible pillar for me and my family as we navigate our new reality, and we want to offer that same flexibility to you all. As we've heard throughout this summit, our goal is unified. This is a time for action. No matter your background or your skill sets, there's a place for you here. Whether you can give 1 hour a month or 5 hours a week, we can use your talents. We are a flexible organization because we know that life with a chronic disease is anything but predictable. And if you aren't in a position to volunteer your time at this moment, you can still be a vital part of this mission. There are 2 different ways that you might be able to help us. One being donations. So every dollar that's given to RKDF goes directly back into educating nephrologists, attending medical conferences, printing brochures that help families find their way, and so many other things. Another piece too is digital advocacy. So with me working on social media for RKDF, I can just tell you that there's a simple click that can make such a difference. So you liking, commenting, sharing our posts can help us bypass algorithms and reach a wider audience. So if you aren't already, I really encourage you to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn and help us make that impact. Your engagement will bring awareness, and our awareness then can lead to the funding and the research that we need to reach our goal of stabilizing and treating this disease. In closing, I want to thank you all for joining this summit. A tremendous amount of time and heart is poured into this event by our volunteers to make it possible each year. And we are deeply grateful that you have decided to join us. Together, we aren't just a foundation, but we are a movement working towards a better future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. That was very heartfelt, and we're just so glad to have you. Sherry, why don't you go next, and then we'll go right to Vincent.
Certainly. Yes, thank you, Jess. I certainly could echo a lot of what you said. And that is certainly one of the reasons, and the most important reason why my family and I were able to jump in with both feet. And many of you heard our story earlier. This is what we can do, right? There's not a lot of things that we can do to fix this disease, but it's our part that allows us to have some kind of hope that what we are doing is making a difference. And certainly my role now as an ambassador team lead is to help get the awareness out there, to find those patients that many of these presenters have said today is the most critical. We need to find people for this FDA study. And so after diagnosis for myself, dialysis and transplant 15 years later, I saw Richard Nelson's post on social media. So that social media piece was huge in reaching our family and becoming connected with the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation. And so our hope is that we will continue to advocate and support its mission of halting the disease and finding these families. And so I chose to volunteer, and my family has jumped on board with me. I'm grateful that they have been a great support. Many of them have been watching today. I'm sorry. And not only my family, but prior to jumping in as the ambassador team lead, I was a teacher, and I had a great support through my teaching community. And they encouraged me and have given to the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation as well, because they knew how important it was to my family and I. And my colleague shared a TV spot that my husband and I did with everybody in our school district, which was quite amazing that there were so many people watching that TV spot. Now, as an ambassador, is that something that we are asked to do? No. But those are some of the things that I felt passionate enough to contact our local TV station and try to spread the word as much as we possibly could. And so the things that we are doing as an ambassador team, and certainly we would love to have anybody on board with us, can be as simple as just sharing your story with your nephrologist, your primary care doctor. If you have a dietitian or a pediatrician, if you have children, to share this information with them so that we can make sure that the awareness is out there throughout the whole medical community. I recently participated in a National Kidney Foundation kidney walk and wore my ambassador shirt that said, "Ask me about ADTKD." I'm not sure if you can see that on here, but I had a dietitian come up and ask me, "What is ADTKD?" So that started a conversation that really opened my eyes as well to the fact that it's not just nephrologists that we're reaching out to, but it's really any medical doctor that can be on board with us and be on the lookout for symptoms and family history of renal failure, and get them on board with us to understand what Rare Kidney Disease Foundation is trying to do. We also have little stickers now that we can be putting on laptops and water bottles. If you're interested in one, my daughter made these up, and just another way for us to spread awareness and get the information out there, wearing our t-shirts, participating in transplant walks, and being willing to talk about and share our story. You know, initially, maybe it seemed like a private thing, but being involved in the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation has helped me become more vocal about sharing our story and finding people who we can refer to Dr. Blyer, and that's really what we want. So we would love to have you participate with the ambassador program. We need many volunteers. I live in upstate New York, and we certainly can't cover the entire country nor other countries as well, but we are trying to do what we can do. If you were on this morning, you heard my husband talk about his company and the mailing that we did to 500 nephrologists. That wouldn't have been possible without support from our community, and just trying to think outside the box and trying to find people that can support us and share our story and help us to spread the word about the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation and what we are trying to do. So we welcome you on board. If you would like to, you can contact me at Sherry at the Rare Kidney Disease website, and we will make sure that we get you on board with us.
Thank you so much, Sherry. Vincent, great to see you. I'm glad you could make it. Let me turn it over to you.
Okay. I started with the rare kidney disease after my wife passed away 4 years ago, March 1st, actually, of 4 years ago. I have 6 children, 4 of whom have the kidney disease, have rare kidney disease, 2 of whom do not. In fact, one just received his second transplant about 2 weeks ago. So we're in the process of bringing him into Boston on a regular basis so that he can have his blood work done and everything can be checked to make sure he has no infection or rejection. I really started getting active in the summer of 2024 when I had a very enjoyable conference call with Kathy Stankus and Suzanne Kelly. It was really a conference call to find out what my background was, what my work history was, what professional experience I had, so that what skill set did I have that would be most suited in a volunteer effort. So I let them know that I would volunteer to do anything because I have a lot of horses in this race. Not only do I have 6 children, but I also have 14 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild. So I'm very concerned about their association with kidney disease. So I thought that the more volunteering I could do, the more active that I could be in the foundation, the more I would know what was going on. I'd be kind of in the inside of all of the research, all of the clinical study. All 4 of those children who have the rare kidney disease are on the registry, and they meet with Dr. Blyer on a fairly regular basis. And every 3 months, they go into Boston in order to have their blood taken so that we can keep a strong monitor on what's going on with them. Getting back to that conference call that I had with Kathy and Suzanne, we decided that probably the best thing for me to do would be to be involved in writing and editing. So the first task that they assigned me was to write thank you notes to donors who had made contributions to the foundation. Very easily done. It didn't take very much time at all. There was an entire script that I could write onto thank you notes and send out. But mainly, my job became to critique some articles that were written in professional magazines and newsletters, and also to edit and proofread the variety of articles that were going to be put into the foundation newsletter. So that started in the summer of 24, and it kind of evolves over time to be really the exclusive volunteer work that I do now, is to edit, proofread, and kind of just clean up articles that people are going to put on the newsletter. We have a new newsletter coming out, I believe, in April. I've proofread and edited 4 articles so far. I have 2 more sitting in my folder that I have to get to, and I suspect that there'll be more coming along the way for me to edit and proofread. I enjoy that work a lot. It's right along the lines of what I had done in the past in my professional life. And what it does more than anything else is it exposes me to what's going on clinically, what's going on with our research. It makes me feel as if I'm not only contributing something to the foundation and other folks that have this disease, but I'm also learning a lot of things that I didn't know about the disease. So I'm hoping that whatever small contribution I can make to the foundation will help this next generation. I can't do anything to bring my wife back, but I certainly can help in seeing that my children and my grandchildren receive some advantage from any little thing that I can do as a volunteer. So I encourage, as Sherry did and everybody else did, I encourage anybody who would like to volunteer and be part of this foundation, a very active foundation, to join. It's very easy to do. And it does not take up a lot of your time. During the time that I'm editing, obviously, I'm going to be putting in more time and effort in working on the edits. But there are entire times during the course of the year where I don't have an assignment. So it's not a large amount of time that you have to dedicate if you're a volunteer. It's more a matter of commitment and love of the volunteering than it is time spent, to be perfectly honest with you. So I encourage anybody out there who would like to ask questions, or anybody who would like to volunteer, to go ahead and do so.
Thank you, Vincent, and thank you everyone for sharing how you found us. And of course, you are invaluable. Um, and I'm caught between the emotion that we all are feeling, because we are all doing this for our children and our grandchildren and great grandchildren. And I too feel that I can't help with the drug development. I can't do the science, but this is what we can do. And we heard throughout the summit how important our voices are as patients. And so, whether it's writing a patient story or is just saying, just join our Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, YouTube page, channel, just sign up and share. That's a huge, huge way to spread the word. And then volunteering, as folks mentioned, there you could turn out to be a social media director and still manage to do that while raising a family of young kids. And Jess has just done a fantastic job. And Sherry and Vincent fitting it into your lives. You know, we all are patients, and so we have very reasonable expectations for what our volunteers can do. And it does feel, I mean, that's why I volunteered and then eventually became the executive director. I felt like I wanted to do something, something that I could do. And as Vincent said, it's as much time or as little time as you have. And we have so many roles. We are looking for someone to help with administrative work. We're looking with someone to help with the newsletter. We are looking for fundraising help. If you have any experience fundraising, either with corporate donors or Facebook, you know, birthday donors or individual group, any little bit of advice or help can work. And then there's one-off tasks like, wouldn't it be great if we could put a postcard on RKDF and ADTKD into magazines that nephrologists read? We've had this idea for a long time. We haven't had the capacity to kind of move forward. We've identified the magazines, but how do we then find the people and make it happen? So we are full of ideas. We are open to new ideas. You know, come to us with an idea and run with it. So any and all interest, we will grab you and find a way to use you. And again, we are a family of families who know what it's like to live with this disease. You don't have to have the disease or be a relative to volunteer. We will take anyone who feels compelled or moved or called to do so. So with that, let me just thank you all again. And I'm going to turn it over to Rich in a minute for closing remarks. Thank you, Vincent, Jess, and Sherry for joining us.
You're welcome.
All right, as we wrap up here on our second day, thank you everyone for being with us. I want to mention again, as with yesterday, if you weren't with us yesterday, there will be, when we turn off this webinar, a window that says, please take a short survey. That's a survey we've put together to just say, what did you like about this? And what topics, what do you want to learn? What do you want to know about for next year? We do listen to your voices, and we're trying to find better ways to connect with you to find what you want this summit to be about, this patient program. So please take that survey. Please let us know what you thought of today and what you would like to see next year. With that, so Rich, do we have you here for some
I'm
closing
here.
remarks? You're here. Excellent. So let me just turn it over to Rich Nelson, our president.
Okay. It should be on. Okay. Thank you, Jess and Sherry and Vincent, for helping us wrap this summit up in such an incredible way. It was perfect. That's really why we exist. We're a patient advocacy organization about a forgotten, hidden, invisible disease, no longer. As I close our 5th annual International Summit, I'm struck by how far we've come. Huge thanks to you, Sharon, for your tireless efforts, coordination, and leadership, to our panelists for providing a blueprint for our bridge forward to a cure, and to the architects of the future, so that this is no longer a life sentence for ADTKD patients. Vincent, your comments struck very much at home. I have four of my siblings and I, of the 6, have 21 children. And we have lots that are, of those, probably 8 or 10 that are in kidney failure right now. So thank you for being all in. And thank you to the, and let me make a note. The foundation will be supporting our current ADTKD patients and your families that we consider members on our CRM system, with live chats and webinars in the coming months. So watch for those. Sharon's already mentioned about giving us feedback. great session. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, panelists, and have a great day. We're adjourned.